Good evening, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would continue to talk about Mr. Teofimo Lopez and where, in my opinion, his career will go from here. Teofimo Lopez, of course, for those of you that did not know, he ended up having a fight against a Spaniard fighter by the name of Sandor Martin. And Sandor Martin, of course, was coming off the biggest win of his career, probably the biggest upset in boxing that I've seen within the past 10 years, and that was his win over Mikey Garcia. And the reason why I say that that was the biggest upset probably of the past 10 years, at least in my eyes, is because no one really thought, including myself, that Sandor Martin had a chance. Now, that probably overall was a little bit of my fault, as well as maybe some others, because Sandor Martin was heavily underestimated and I really didn't know much about him. But I seen that he was a Spaniard fighter. I don't really know a lot of great Spaniard fighters, either in the amateur program or in the pros. I thought that he was going to be pretty much a pushover, and he ended up surprising me very much against Mikey Garcia. But even then, I still thought that Mikey Garcia heavily underestimated him, so I was going to see overall how truly good he actually was. And in the Teofimo Lopez fight, when it came down to the fighter that was going to take him seriously, especially with certain circumstances that have happened to Teo over the past couple of years, I'm not going to necessarily say that I thought Sandor Martin won the fight, but he made it very decently competitive and very close. And yesterday in my fight review, I actually stated that I thought that Teo very clearly won the fight and that I actually thought that he won about 8 rounds to 2. But after recently rewatching it a couple of different occasions, or on a couple of different occasions, I actually thought that the fight was very, very decently close. And if you did give Sandor Martin the fight, I really don't have a problem with it. I think that if he did win the fight, it probably would have been scored 5 rounds to 5, in my opinion, and he probably got the slight edge overall with the 1 point because of the knockdown in the second round. But if you also scored it for 6-4 for Teofimo Lopez, I really don't have a problem with that either. Because in my opinion, Sandor Martin, even though he very clearly was getting at Teofimo Lopez a little bit, in my opinion, he certainly could have threw a hell of a lot more in this fight than what he did. And I thought that that was going to be a little bit of a problem with Sandor Martin, and I ended up being correct. Now, once again, he was able to fluster Teofimo Lopez a lot of times in this fight, but in my opinion, he really should have went at Teofimo Lopez a little bit more. He really should have shoved that left and that right overall down his face. He really should have tried to push him back and get his offense off a little bit more. Because if he would have, he probably would have clearly won this fight. Excuse me, at least in my view. So it is what it is. So I can't necessarily call this fight a robbery. I think that it was a very close fight that could have potentially went either way. But would I still give it to Teofimo Lopez? I still would probably give it to Teofimo Lopez because I thought that he was the all-around busier fighter. And Sandor Martin, even when he was landing very impactful punches, they were only about 2 to 4 per round. So it is what it is. And Teo was doing a lot of decent work to the body. So it is what it is. So it was a fight that could have potentially went either way, but it certainly was not the most impressive by Teofimo Lopez. But the big question is now about Teofimo Lopez, and I'm going to review this video by Dante's Boxing Nation. Where does his career go from here? And Teofimo Lopez is going to be very interesting to see how good or how great of a fighter he actually is when he finally steps into the ring with someone like a Josh Taylor or a Regis Prograis or someone like a Jose Ramirez or an Arnold Barbosa or some of these other fighters. It's going to be very particularly interesting because now Teofimo Lopez, once again, for the first time in his career, and it's also the same with Devin Haney, if he moves up to 140 pounds, he's finally going to be against fighters that overall can handle overall some of his power. It can handle his size overall. And on top of that, they're going to be decently skilled. They can handle everything somewhat that you're going to throw out, that you're going to throw at them. So are you truly the talent that a lot of people once upon a time thought you were? Or is this really overall Teofimo Lopez at his best? Is this pretty much what we're always going to see from Teofimo? And if I had to bet on it, more than likely it's going to be the latter. Because this is now the second or third fight to where I've seen Teofimo Lopez have a very tough time with his defense, sometimes with his head movement, and also sometimes looking for that one good power shot or not throwing combinations when he needs to, not having that good of a game plan. So Teofimo Lopez, it is going to be very interesting to see where he goes from here. But anyways, Dante's going to tune in. I'm going to talk. Let's see what happens.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So after a controversial win over Sandor Martin by Teofimo Lopez, Teo is caught on camera asking his dad, "Do I still got it? Do I still have it?" Now, first off, to answer Lopez's question, he does still have it. The only problem is what Lopez has and always had is not enough to compete against the elite fighters in whatever division he's in. I already told you guys before this fight that Teofimo Lopez, he could not beat a Regis Prograis, a Josh Taylor, an Arnold Barboza, a Gary Antoine Russell. He loses to all of the top guys in the division. And then shortly after that, he unofficially loses to...
I'm not quite sure if Teofimo loses to Arnold Barboza, at least 100% in my opinion. I would have to watch a little bit more of him. But after watching this fight, would I bet on Teofimo Lopez to beat a Josh Taylor or a Regis Prograis, probably the two best 140-pounders in that division? No.
Sandor Martin. And it looks even worse for Teofimo Lopez when once again a fight ends in controversy where a lot of people feel that you were gifted the decision and your immediate...
Well, Nante, at the end of the day, even if you thought that Teofimo probably won the fight, you probably were not going to compliment him that much. It just is what it is. You don't like Teofimo. He's not a fighter all in all that is on your radar unless you're talking negatively about him. It just is what it is. But listen, at the end of the day, Teofimo Lopez, when I take a look at him, he just has a little bit too many faults, in my opinion, to be at the top of 140 pounds. And Devin Haney, it's also going to be very interesting to see where he goes. I would say that Devin Haney, in my opinion, that he's probably a little bit better than Teofimo Lopez. You know, Teofimo, of course, has more power than Devin Haney, and he's probably a better all-around athlete. But I would say that Devin Haney has the higher boxing IQ out of the two of them.
reaction is, man, do I still got it? Do I still even have it? Teofimo Lopez, he said the week of the fight, I can't wait to show you guys all of my new improvements. And whatever those improvements were, wasn't even enough for him to beat Sandor without controversy. So that clip that I played for you.
Well, once again, I don't mind that I went to Teofimo Lopez. It was a very close fight. But Teofimo has shown now in two separate fights, one in the George Kambosos fight and another one overall in this fight, that he doesn't really make adjustments very well. And from what I see, he doesn't usually tend to have a multitude of game plans, which is what you're going to need as an elite fighter. Now, to be fair to him, he did overall finally go to the body, so he did change up the game plan a little bit, but I still see a lot of the same faults. I see his hands down a lot of the time. I still see him trying to go for that one knockout shot or not throwing combinations when he needs to. Difficulty changing the pace. Sometimes a little bit heavy on his feet. So we'll see what happens.
Guys, where T.O. says this, someone was sharing it on Twitter, and they shared it with Regis Prograis. And Regis Prograis, he reacted to it, and he said, too much pressure. He's breaking mentally. I remember the first time Devin Haney beat George Kambosos, right after the fight, ESPN's Joe Tessitore, he immediately tried to discredit Devin Haney's win by saying, we knew George Kambosos wasn't really that good. The only reason he beat Teofimo is because Teo was having health issues, et cetera, right? Now, the irony of that is Tim Brad.
Well, in my opinion, George Kambosos really was never that great in the first place either. But now, overall, after watching this performance, I do have to wonder, was it really because Teofimo Lopez underestimated George Kambosos as much as I thought? Or was it just that George Kambosos had the perfect type of style to really beat someone like a Teofimo Lopez? And it probably is a little bit of a mix of both. But either way, Teofimo had a major underperformance in that fight.
Credit to him, at least on this occasion, before the fight, he said there should be no excuses. No matter who wins, I don't want to hear no excuses. And Joe Tessitore still tried to make excuses, and Tim Bradley did check him on that. He said, nah, we can't take credit away from Devin Haney. Devin was just a better man. He did something that Teofimo Lopez could not do to George Kambosos. Not to mention, ESPN was calling George Kambosos the undisputed champion when he didn't even have all of the belts. Just like they misled people calling Teofimo the undisputed champion. So my question to ESPN's Joe Tessitore, what is the excuse now? What are you going to say now? You don't make excuses for why someone lost when that fighter turns down the rematch.
Well, one could say maybe if you wanted to, if you were looking to make an excuse for Teofimo Lopez, that maybe because it was a short replacement fight and Teofimo did not have the full training camp for a fighter like a Sandor Martin, that maybe that is the reason why. But to be quite honest with you, I'm not really sure if I'm even going to go that far. I just think that Teofimo Lopez has certain faults that he has, and so far from what I see, I think that he needs a different trainer in his corner. Doesn't mean that he has to get rid of his father or anything, but he does need a different perspective in his corner. He does, because his father, in my opinion, is not a good enough coach.
That makes no sense. That's the whole purpose of having the rematch. To show the fighter, this is what I can do to you when I'm 100%. Tio didn't do that. He turned down a rematch and moved up to 140. But now, after Devin beats George Kambosos twice, now Tio wants to call George Kambosos out. He called him out in his post-fight interview after the Martin fight. You know, in the sport of boxing, especially when it comes to fighters on a hope list, fans and media, they're so quick to make excuses for why a fighter is no longer performing the way he was performing before.
Well, I agree with you there, Dante. I agree with you 100%. But let's not sit here and act like overall you don't do the same shit. For those of you that go this far back on my channel, there was a while ago to where Canelo and Jamal Charlo earlier this year, they were thought to maybe potentially have a fight. And Dante overall for allegedly believing overall that Jamal Charlo is always going to beat Canelo because Canelo apparently can't beat him. At least that's what Dante states. When that fight was about to happen, Dante all of a sudden started backtracking and he said, "Oh well, Jamal Charlo, he doesn't look like the same fighter anymore." So, like I always say about Dante, I don't mind all of his points, but very hypocritical because a lot of the same points that ESPN does and some of these other dudes do, he does the exact same shit.
He doesn't have it anymore. He's not the same fighter. He's gotten old overnight. This is the reason why I tell you, he still got it. He was just always a limited fighter. He's always had his flaws. And that's the reason why he didn't look good against his previous opponent, Campo. And now he damn near lost to Sandor. Once again, by Teofimo's own admission, he said the week of this fight that he was a new and improved Teofimo Lopez. Listen, Tio, he still has speed. He's still a good counterpuncher. He can get some decent wins. But if he's struggling against Sandor and Martin, that means he really doesn't have too much of a chance outside of a puncher's chance against the top guys in his division. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
And at the moment, I would tend to agree with Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation. So we'll see overall what ends up happening with that. It'll be very interesting. But do I believe that after this performance at Tio, that he will be the king of 140 pounds? No, I don't. I think that Teofimo Lopez, I think that he pretty much overall is going to end up losing some of the bigger fights at 140. But I could be wrong. We'll see what happens. I think the best fight for Teofimo Lopez next would be that of an Arnold Barbosa or maybe a Jose Zepeda, someone overall at the 140-pound division that is a step up in competition maybe, but someone overall that maybe isn't one of the top three guys. But we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's really about it for the Teofimo Lopez conversation. I just thought that'd be very interesting. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll talk to you all later.